It has been said that a great captain leads by example, inspires with integrity, and puts the team's success above personal glory. Let's talk about what makes a great team captain on today's episode of the Playing with a Purpose podcast. All right, welcome to the Playing with a Purpose podcast, where we explore topics related to the moral development of collegiate athletes and young people as it relates to character, responsibility, and purpose. I'm your host, Matt Barker, and today I'm excited to have Freed-Hardeman head women's basketball coach, Miss Abby Stutts, with me on today's episode. Abby, welcome to the program.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, it's great to have you. And of course, I've had your brother on season 1. I'm actually having him on the next episode that we'll have. So I have the whole Stutts family. The only one I haven't had is your dad, Miles, which I know him pretty well. He'd probably be a pretty good podcast guest too. And it's interesting. I mentioned Drew, probably maybe one of the only NAIA schools that have a brother-sister combo, head women's basketball coach, head men's basketball coach. So that's an interesting thing as well. For the listeners that might not know who you are, give us a little bit of background about yourself, maybe some prior coaching experience, just some information about your family and all that good stuff.
Yeah, it is really neat that me and Drew get to be at the same university. Really just kind of start from the beginning. I am from Florence, Alabama, so I grew up there my entire life, and then I went to Mars Hill Bible School, 1st grade through 12th grade, and then I stayed and I went to the University of North Alabama and got my degree there. I definitely had kind of a different journey as far as getting into coaching. I did not play college basketball. That was the dream, that was the goal, but I had a lot of knee injuries throughout my career in high school. And so I actually had 3 ACL tears, 4 knee surgeries before I even graduated. And so at that point in time, I decided, I knew I wanted to coach. I knew I wanted to be around the game, but I was going to have to find a different way than being on the floor. And so definitely God has blessed me with directing our paths of just creating opportunities and the right people to be able to give me that opportunity. And so actually, while I was in school at UNA, I started coaching at a local high school, Lexington High School, and Coach David Hill at the time was coaching women's basketball there, and so he gave me an opportunity to just start coaching junior high, and I was also assistant varsity and kind of just worked my way up there. And then Melissa Hammond actually reached out. She was the volleyball coach there, very successful, both of them. And so I got to coach volleyball and basketball for 4 years while being a student at UNA and getting my degree. And so I really just got a lot of experience. At the time, like I said, I didn't really know what the future was going to look like, but knew I wanted to coach. And then after being around those great coaches and those great girls, it definitely just kind of propelled me and got me excited for the future. And then Coach Epperson hired me here after I graduated at UNA for my first assistant coach job here at Freed. Was his assistant the past 4 years, and then just finished my first year of head coach here.
Yeah, and had a really successful season. I mean, we were 28-6 and 8-4 in conference play. Went to the final 8 of the tournament in your first year. Now, no high, pressure there for next year. It's like you start out so well, and of course you knew a lot of those players. You recruited probably a lot of them as an assistant coach. Been here as you mentioned for 1 season as head coach, so you'll be beginning your 2nd season here next year. Question you probably get a lot is, how is it different from transitioning from that assistant coach position to now being the head coach? I know you know a lot of the players still, but what's the difference there between an assistant coach and a head coach?
Definitely kind of leaned on my experience like I talked about at Lexington. That actually exact situation happened where I was the assistant coach, and then an opportunity came up where I could transition into being the head coach for the varsity girls. And so learning from that experience in the past, but thankfully Coach Epperson, whenever I was the assistant, let me be very hands-on and very vocal. And so I definitely got to learn not only through the head coaches I've worked under, but I also felt like I really had learned from my own experiences as well, of just getting to kind of implement and think on my own, kind of almost like a head coach. And so just super grateful for the people that have believed in me and given me opportunities. And then we've had great girls too. And that really this year, I would say, is just the biggest praise to them with that transition. I said the transition honestly couldn't have been any easier because of them. There was already that trust, that respect there that was already built. And so we just continue to build on that this year. And then obviously winning really helps. It keeps people happy. But no, just a great group of girls who I felt like really bought into the future that I want this program to continue to grow in, and continue to build on.
Yeah, and you mentioned this a little bit, but a coach is only as good as the players that they're able to coach. And so the transition, you have to have buy-in not only from the coaching staff, but also from those players as well. And it helped, as you said, that have a little bit of familiarity with you already. But what we're talking about today on today's episode is team leadership, team captains. The title of this episode is What Makes a Great Team Captain. And you might actually have more than one player that fits that role. There might be multiple team captains, but I really want to touch on a little bit like how much that peer leadership, how, the coaches can do a lot, but it takes some player buy-in and players stepping up into different leadership roles as well. And you've seen that with your team, I'm sure, and as well as all the other teams at Freed-Hardeman, players that step up and do those things. So what process do you go through when you are maybe identifying or selecting people or recognizing certain talents that they have? Is this something that you see early on, or is it something that throughout the season you see people stepping up into different roles?
Yeah, absolutely. We kind of have the process set where we don't name our captains until right about before season begins. So we have all of that preseason workouts, all of the preseason practices, and so we really just kind of make it a very even playing field where we kind of let that process happen naturally. And then I really give the team a big say-so in who they believe should be a team captain, because I think that's super important that people that I may see have great qualities. It's super important that the team also sees those qualities as well.
Yeah.
And so really we just have every girl nominate who they believe would be a good team captain. And really before they even nominate, I definitely sit down and have a meeting of saying, these are the important qualities that I believe embody being a team captain. And for us, it is to embody our core values. And so those core values for us are what it means to be an FHU Lady Lion. And so F is for fearless, H is for hardworking, U is for united. And so the people, when we're thinking of nominating team captains, we want people who embody those qualities, and maybe they haven't mastered them, but they are continuing to be the best that they can be with those characteristics. And so we definitely let the team have a big say-so and vote on who they believe should be their leaders. And then ultimately, I guess I get the final say-so of naming them team captains, but that's kind of the process we have.
Yeah, and a lot of this goes back to what I've heard other coaches say too. It's buying into that team culture, and maybe each team has a little bit different. Yours is those 3 letters that you talked about, being fearless and different things. And those players that exemplify those qualities obviously make good team leaders. And every organization, when students graduate, they'll go to a business. They're going to have the same kind of values at that particular business. So a lot of these skills translate in that way. And it's just finding out what those core values are. Or maybe some people call it team culture.
Yeah.
So how do you think leadership in sports maybe differs, and maybe in some ways it might be similar, but from leadership in other areas of life? And maybe how can the leadership opportunities they have in sports help them maybe down the line in different opportunities?
Yeah, I really don't know if there's that big of a difference that translates. I really think that that's kind of what we learn in sports, is all of those different lessons that we're presented with adversity and success, and how to manage other people's personalities and teamwork and all of those things. And so that's the blessing that sports gives us. And so I really think that, like, if you are a natural born leader or someone who maybe has been pushed to become a leader, that is something that's going to translate for the rest of your life. And so I remember Kelly Harper came, former Lady Vol coach.
Yeah.
She came and talked at our benefit dinner. And I remember this quote. She said, if you're a high achiever, you're a high achiever at everything. You don't get to choose that. And that kind of stuck with me, as far as just, if you're a leader, that is what comes natural to you in whatever setting you are placed in. And so whether that's sports, whether that's the workplace, whether that's your family, and then of course with that, also learning how to follow, I think is also just as important as learning how to lead, is also learning how to collaborate with other people and
having
be
a little
follower.
humility.
Yes, but I do think it's who you are at the end of the day.
Yeah. So we talk about this, and we mentioned this a little bit earlier, but there are these qualities, and it could be different for each team. Each team has a little bit of different culture and what they expect. But there are probably some core qualities that all great team captains have. Every team needs these certain qualities. So for you, for your team, and maybe for just team captains in general, what are some of those core qualities that define what a great team captain is?
Yeah, Yeah, I definitely thought of just a couple words that come to mind. Consistent is a word that I feel like is consistently coming to my mind
Yeah.
whenever I think of a team captain and a leader. Is just somebody who is going to show up every day. And regardless of what it is, it could be the weight room, it could be the classroom, it could be practice, it could be a shoot around, it could be the biggest game of the year. No matter what, they are super consistent with their attitude. They're super consistent with their effort. And that's not ever something that you have to question.
Yeah.
And so hopefully that's what your whole team has.
Yeah.
But especially, there's going to be days that there's going to be more stress, or there's going to be a lot of things going on outside of the court. But really, your team captains are those people that you have to rely on, that the coach and the coaching staff, they're going to bring the energy, they're going to bring the effort. But you've got to have the people on the floor to back you up with that. And so they've also got to assist you with bringing that effort, that attitude, that energy, that consistent hard work. So that's a word that really comes to my mind. Is just being an everyday kind of girl. Accountable is one that comes to my mind too, that I think is super important, and just holding themselves to a really high standard, but also holding their teammates to a high standard, and kind of what I was talking about too, of just they've got to be sure that they're doing their part, but if they see someone else who is maybe falling short to the standard that the coach or the program holds, they've got to be the one, like that is one of their roles, is to hold their teammates accountable, to be sure that we're becoming the best team that we can become, and that they're being the best player that they can become.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's super important, just being kind of extra eyes and ears for the coach. And then ultimately, we've kind of said this word hand in hand with team captain, is just being ultimately a leader, and someone who's going to do the work themselves, and they're never going to ask somebody else to do something that they're not already consistently doing. And that could be vocally, that could be physically, that could be their attitude towards things, but ultimately, like, they are the example.
Yeah, and it also builds that respect factor too. If they're willing to do the work themselves, and then when they're telling other people to do it, they're going to have the respect of their teammates, because the teammates see that they're willing to do that as well. So accountability and respect kind of go hand in hand in that way.
For sure.
As well. Can you share maybe a personal experience? Of course, this is your first season as head coach. You've probably seen a lot of the other 4 seasons you've been here as well, where maybe a team captain or just a leader on the team, maybe they weren't named a team captain, but maybe they made a impact on the game, and maybe it's nothing that, maybe it's just kind of working hand in hand with you, but maybe that person on the court, like you said, there's things that you can't always do as a coach on the sidelines. Is there a moment that comes to mind, maybe a player or just an event that happened that maybe showed you that this person made an impact on the game by their leadership on the court?
Yeah, I think a perfect example of that is actually a senior we just graduated, Kelsey Bender. She was somebody who, at the end of the year, we had our Roar Awards, and our team voted on Team MVP. And Kelsey was actually given that award by her teammates, and she was somebody who in the past had been a team captain, but if you look at her stat line, or maybe if you look at all of her accolades, she was not that player who maybe scored the most points or maybe who led the team on the stat sheet. But obviously her teammates valued her and respected her as a player because of all of the little things that she did, and it was that consistent effort. And that's honestly what I said about her whenever I was presenting the award, was she was an everyday kind of girl. And it was just the little things. She was going to give consistent effort. She was going to have a team-first mentality. And she was going to do the gritty work where maybe are not things that are super flashy, but are very noticed and valued, even though maybe the stat sheet or awards don't always recognize those things.
Yeah, and she was a really fun player to watch as well. I know all of us on the scores table, I worked the basketball games as the announcer, and one of the words that we always say with her is she just seems to be mentally tough. Like the situations in the game, maybe it was a high-pressure moment, and she always seemed calm. And that's something that can also help other players without even really saying anything, just the presence of being mentally tough.
Yes.
Always kind of had that presence. There was a few others that had that as well. Maybe not always being the most vocal, but she was always consistently in the moment and things like that.
For sure.
I'm a big communication guy. I teach communication classes here, so this is always a question I ask most of the guests on the podcast, but this is especially true probably in great team captains. You got to have communication, not only player to player, but maybe the team captain communicating what the coach is wanting as well. So what role do you think communication plays in this leadership of the team captain, and maybe communicating what the coach is wanting? How effective is that, and what's some good ways that you've seen that handled?
Yeah, I definitely think that is probably one of the most important things is being able to communicate properly. And so, like I said before in passing, of just like they get to be more eyes and ears for the coach. And so they kind of get to see more of potentially an inside view of what the coach's thoughts and feelings are of maybe different meetings. If you're getting to meet with the team captain and the coach is spending a little bit more time giving a deeper vision or things with the standards that you're wanting out of your team. And so it's not always an easy position to be in as a team captain just because you are held to the highest standard, but it is an honor. And I think with that, though, it comes some hard conversations. I think first and foremost, just with the team captains and the coach, of maybe there is some hard conversations, maybe there is some confrontation because, like I said, you're held to the highest standard where you are the example. But we also want that to be super encouraging and positive in the right way of, it is an honor that you're getting to be put in that position and you're capable of executing that and becoming the great player and person that the team sees in you. And so I think also just teammate to teammate is super important, where you have to be willing to have those hard conversations and maybe some conflict, maybe some confrontation when there is accountability, or maybe there is a heated moment in practice or games where they have to be able to handle that properly and know ultimately it is about the team becoming the best that they can become. And so with that, it's not always going to be rainbows and sunshines. And so being able to understand the ultimate goal is for us to be the best we can be, and that at times is going to come with some uncomfortable situations. And so just with that, kind of like what you talked about, the trust and respect, I think knowing when those conversations happen and those situations happen, the bottom line is there already is trust and respect, and you're understanding that's your role. Your teammates put you in that role for a reason. And so that's where the love is coming from, And so that's super important. And then like we talked about too, of coaches talking with the team captains, just ultimately being super connected, being connected with your coaches, being connected with your teammates, and kind of being a little bit of a mediator between the two, just being able to consistently communicate with both sides and sharing the vision that your coach has, and then also being able to communicate maybe some things that the team is feeling or seeing too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's an important one too, because sometimes the coaches aren't always know exactly what's going on from a player's perspective. Being able to communicate that to the coaches, I think, is very, very important as well. You touched on trust and respect a little bit earlier. When you mentioned specifically some players that you've had that maybe on the stat line didn't show up as far as scoring the most points, but they made a big impact on the game based on their leadership, maybe their communication and things like that. Anything else you want to add about trust and respect, maybe how that a captain can build this trust, even if maybe they're not the one scoring the most points? How can they build that trust and respect? We talked about consistency, consistently showing up. Anything else that maybe you want to add to that?
I think, too, just like having a very unselfish heart and attitude as well. Whenever you let your teammates know, whether it's through your actions, whether it's through your words, and hopefully it's both of those combined, you're able to show that it's not about you and it's not about maybe the title that you've been given, but kind of what I hit on before, of it ultimately is about the team becoming the best that we can become. And so I think with that trust and respect, you coming in with a humble heart and knowing that this is not me sitting on a high horse, this is me loving you, respecting you, wanting what's best for you, and ultimately as a person of being able to do hard things and have a great attitude while doing it, and keeping a very unselfish attitude while doing it, I think is a super important quality as well.
Yeah, and it goes back to some of those 5 core values we talk about in NAI: servant leadership, willing to do the work yourself and modeling that for other people. So let's think about some misconceptions that a lot of people have about team captains. And we really, this episode's really about leadership, I guess, if you want to look at it that way. But on the court, we call these people team captains. Maybe some people have a little bit of misconception about what that means. Like some of the things we talked about, what a team captain is not. Some people, that's what they think about when they think of team captain. So what are some misconceptions that come to your mind about being a team captain?
I definitely think a lot of times people can definitely be deceived by thinking it's the person who scores the most points. because that's just what everybody, loves watching. It catches people's attention. It's what shows up on the stat sheet. And so, yes, that can at times be a natural position for a team captain to be in, is maybe somebody who is a leading scorer, but at times that can also not be the case. And so I think that that's a misconception. I think one, too, is that you have to have a super big, loud personality. I definitely think that there's a lot of different leadership styles. And honestly, you kind of have to have a balance with that with team captains. We definitely like to have more than one team captain. And so if you have all, I guess you can call them alphas, if you have somebody who all has super big personalities and are very vocal and don't know how to work with other people, then it may not be a great leadership team, And so I think that can be a misconception too, of just, oh, well, I have to be a really big talker or I have to be super vocal. I definitely think that you can lead by example, and it is just as powerful as somebody who maybe is also super comfortable talking in front of people. And then I think once you kind of earn that title of team captain, not to forget that person doesn't have it all figured out. That person has not arrived. They're not perfect. They're never not going to fail. And so I think that that's super important too, that yes, they are held to a super high standard. And yes, they are the example, but at the same time, that person is also going to have a bad game, or they're going to have a bad practice, or maybe something is stressful going on outside of the court. And so they also need that support too, that, just because maybe you're not named a team captain doesn't mean that you still don't have the role to be a great teammate and to also help push your teammates and also to help push your team captains as well. To not forget about them either, that they're holding a lot of pressure and a lot of weight, and that is an honor, but at the same time, they need that encouragement and support as well.
Yeah, you make a great point, and this is true just in life in general with the different personalities sometimes that you encounter. I teach a small group communication class, and we do a personality inventory, so I know who not to put together. And you're kind of the same idea you're talking about here. You don't want to have two alphas that are just going to just constantly butt heads on something. You need the different types of leadership styles, maybe one that's real vocal, maybe one that's a little more quiet. We call those sharks and turtles. So are you a shark that's going to overpower the people, or are you a turtle that's more likely to retreat, or are you someone that's going to collaborate?
Right.
And really you want collaboration if at all possible, but everybody's going to have a different personality. So I think it's a great point as well that you made there. You mentioned pressure situations, conflict, all these different things. What role and maybe how does a team captain manage the pressure of balancing personal performance? You mentioned that sometimes the captain's not always one scoring the most points. Sometimes they are. Sometimes they are the one that is the leading scorer, maybe the one that's considered the best player on the team, however you want to define that. So what pressure is there sometimes I want to still do good, to make sure I'm doing everything I can personally, but I also want to make sure I'm looking out for the team. That's got to be a tough balance for a team captain to handle.
Yeah, I think something that we really talked about with our team this year is trying to train our minds to not be super result driven. And so that's a very difficult thing to do, not only as players, but even just as coaches, as we put a lot of value in wins and losses. We put a lot of value in how many points we score. And so I think just ultimately trying to not let our performance dictate how we feel about ourselves as players and ultimately as people. We put a lot of our self-worth in that. But as far as managing that pressure and balancing that, I think regardless of maybe your role in the game, or maybe it is just a bad day, whether you're the point guard, whether you're the leading scorer, maybe you're the best defender, whatever that role may be, and you're struggling, still finding a way to overcome that and still keeping that team first mentality where you're able to impact the game no matter what your role may be. Maybe you're in foul trouble and now you're having to sit on the bench. Maybe you're injured and you're having to take on a different role. Maybe your shots are just not falling. Finding a way to still be an encourager, a leader, somebody who can give support to others. Find those little ways to still impact the game regardless of if it's points scored or maybe you're on and off the floor.
Yeah. One of the things I looked up in this question, because I was curious about it, was it talked about sometimes you can balance this by delegating some of that responsibility to others, maybe empowering others. Like you talked about, if you're not able to be in the game, if you're injured, having someone that you can maybe trust that is taking on some of that burden as
Yeah.
well, because it is a team. It's not just one person. So maybe having some things that other players can do to help you out can maybe alleviate some of that pressure that's on you to try to do all of it for yourself, but also making sure you're looking out for the team as well. That's got to be a challenge for any team captain to handle. That has definitely got to be a burden. So the other thing I wanted to ask you, you work with a lot of recruits from high school, maybe even younger. As you start to look at these, you work with coaches, obviously, as you're recruiting players. Well, is there any advice that you would give to someone that wants to be a team captain or maybe aspires for that, or maybe coaches that are working with players on developing them to help them become better people that have the qualities of a team captain?
For sure. I definitely think it starts with just thinking about the people who have been in your life, who have impacted you. Maybe it's teammates, maybe it's coaches, maybe it's a teacher, whoever that is, and think about the qualities of why they made that impact on you. And then also just really take some time to reflect on yourself. And we actually were kind of talking about this at class at church last night, of just understanding and realizing the gifts and talents that God has given you, and really being able to embrace that and use those. And comparison can be a thief, where you're constantly looking at other people and saying, well, I want to be like her. Well, God didn't make you to be just like her. And so understanding that balance of the people around you who have all of those qualities, just take a little bit from that, but also understand that God made you the way you are for a reason, and really be able to use that to share the impact with others around you as well. And I think too, like, I was really encouraged growing up with my family, with great teammates, great coaches, to try new things, to get out of your comfort zone. And that's not easy, because it is something that you're uncomfortable with, and people really kind of stray away from uncomfortableness. But I think when you're surrounded by people who are pushing you to be your best, then you're ultimately able to overcome that fear, kind of like what we talked about with our quality of fearless. But really try new things, push yourself out of your comfort zone, continue to grow yourself as a person, I think is super important. And then also just taking time to realize your why, of why are you in the place that you're in? Why do you have the talents that God has given you? And really remember that when things get hard, or maybe there is a little bit of self-doubt, or maybe an uncomfortable situation, being able to kind of fall back onto that why and let that fuel you forward and be able to overcome the adversity.
Yeah, understand your identity, like who you are, right? And that sometimes takes a while to figure out, but once you do, leaning on that, I think that's important for sure. That's some great information there. Anything else that you can think of? Usually at the end, it's kind of, if there's anything else that maybe we didn't get to touch on that you can think of as far as team captains, your experience with that?
I guess I want to say thank you to our team captains that we had this year. We had Kaylee Odom, Brooklyn Crouch, Rachel Satterley, and I think that they led our team extremely well, and they were a really key piece to our success on and off the floor this year. And so just want to say a big thank you to them. And then kind of just what we were talking about, just encourage people to continue to try new things, surround yourself with good people who are going to be good influences, who are going to encourage you to do the right thing and really push yourself to become the best version of yourself. Because ultimately, that's what I believe that God has designed sports for. That's what we talk about with our team a lot, is this is just the avenue that God has given us and the talents that God has given us to become who He wants us to become. And so understanding that whatever your talent may be, whatever your gift may be, to use it for His glory and to become the best version of yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Great thoughts there. One of the things I was thinking about too, we were talking about mental toughness. We were in the Mid-South Conference, and there's always, every time you go through a season in that conference, you have to have mental toughness. It's one of the toughest conferences in the country. And just going through a season with that schedule, it's hard to go through a season without losing some games. So learning how to lean on those players that you can trust to help guide the team through the things that you can't do on the court, I think it just makes it even more important when you're in a tough schedule like that Freed-Hardeman, pretty much every Freed-Hardeman team has to face. And Mid-South Conference doesn't make it easy on us. So definitely another reason I wanted you to come on, because I know you can speak to that and how those team captains has really helped you as a coaching staff, but also how they can really lead other players. And again, it talks about, we've mentioned this, helps them develop leadership skills for later. They can translate those skills to other things as well. Well, Abby, I really appreciate you coming on. This is great, and good luck this next season as you're recruiting. And we lost a few players, but we'll get some to replace them, and maybe have a new team next year.
Yes, thank you so much.
All right, I appreciate it. All right, that'll wrap things up for this episode. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Playing with a Purpose podcast. Special thanks again to Abby Stutts for being my guest this week. Be sure to listen to this episode and future episodes on Spotify or anywhere you listen to podcasts. You can also catch the Playing with a Purpose podcast on the Freed-Hardeman Athletics Champions of Character website at gofhulions.com/champions of character and on the NAIA Champions of Character website at naia.org/champions of character. Join me for our next episode as I talk with Freed-Hardeman head men's basketball coach Mr. Drew Stutts on the topic of humility through success. And remember, winning isn't just about the scoreboard, it's about the character we build along the way. We'll see you next time on the Playing with a Purpose podcast.